Good day. For today's video, we will be discussing sources of historical data. Let's first know the objectives. Number 1, identify the sources of historical data. Number 2, reiterate the distinction of primary sources and secondary sources. Number 3, appreciate historical data and its purpose. Now, history is all about storytelling. Now, what are the bases of history? Basis of history. Number 1, primary source. Number 2, secondary source. Primary source are direct source of information or research, a document not amended by a third party. So meaning this is an original source. It serves as an original source of information about the topic. Examples, you have artifacts, documents, diaries, journals, letters, newspapers and magazine, government records, photographs, maps, postcards, posters, recorded or transcribed speeches, and interview. Example, I have here an old book and it tells us probably about the Middle Age. The Academy of Complement with many new additions. Yan. Nakalagay dyan, 1684, London. Writing. A letter or a writing is a primary source. This is an example of a primary source, certificate of marriage. So before a person receives the ceremony of marriage, usually couple need to accomplish this papers, the certificate of marriage. Okay. Now, if you will try to observe, the certificate of marriage was created or was signed around 1917. So it's a primary source. Example of primary source, you have number 1, chronicles, memoirs, myth, legend that was passed down from word to mouth. So yun yung tinatawag na oral histories. Primary source yun. Next, you have coins. This is an example of an old coin. It's actually a primary source. Another example of primary source, the diary of a young girl, the diary of Anne Frank. Now, who was Anne Frank? Anne Frank was a Jewish girl who became a victim of the persecution of the Jews during World War II. Now you have here a letter, a handwritten letter, primary source. Okay, this is a part of a cuneiform. It's actually a cuneiform, primary source also. This one is also a primary source. This is also a primary source, the Taj Mahal. The pyramids of Egypt is a primary source also. The Great Wall of China is a primary source. Yeah, the amphitheater is also a primary source. Okay, this one is also a primary source. The Leaning Tower of Pisa is also a primary source. What are secondary source? are sources that gives information to the primary source. Example, you have biographies, histories, literary criticism, books written by a third party, arts, chatters, review, newspaper, journal articles. Example of a secondary source. You have here books, dictionary, newspaper. It is the internet a primary source or a secondary source? It depends on the nature of the source. Meaning, if the source was processed, it's a secondary source. If the source or the data was not processed, it's a primary source. If you read the article online, it is a primary source, but always make sure that it is not altered or processed. Who study history? You have historians, anthropologists, archaeologists, scientists, linguists, teachers, sociologists. All of these people study history. That ends our lesson. Class dismissed.